Welcome to the Today Counts show. Today does count because it impacts, it influences your tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. The Today Counts podcast is sponsored by the generous donors of the Lead Today community. I'm your host, Kim Piper. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Today Counts show. Today you're going to meet Angie Taylor. I have not met her except for, just a few minutes ago. We were having some problems connecting. Turned out to be my fault. So what else is new on that front? I'm excited about talking to this lady because she's up to something, and it seems to me that it's pretty darn good. So we're just going to jump right in. Angie, thanks for joining the Today Counts show.
It is an honor to be with you guys today. I really appreciate being able to join you on this.
Yeah, I love talking to leaders, people that are sticking their neck out, trying to do something when they could choose something a little easier to do. My view of leadership is multifaceted. Kind of depends upon my mood, the day, what needs to be said. But I guess when all things are said, I believe that leadership, if it's anything, it's always defined by context. So it's contextual, and it requires us to be adaptive, committed, engaged, present. It's just a lot of diligence and a lot of hard work. And I can just tell by your profile and a little bit that we've talked about and what we're going to talk about, that you kind of come from that, cut from that cloth as well. You kind of seem to be a bit of a fighter yourself. Tell me what Valor Global Foundation is and any of its derivatives.
Yeah, great question. Well, Valor Global Foundation was really born 8 years ago, and it was born out of a need that I saw in the education community. I had been in education for about 25 years and started being incredibly frustrated. I had done public school education. I had been in Christian education and had become really frustrated about we were not preparing kids well for the world that we were sending them into. And my concern around that was we weren't preparing them well academically, and we were not preparing them well on a spiritual level to exist in the world we are living to them. So I really pulled back about 8 years ago and said, gosh, there is a massive problem. I no longer believe that the education as we know it. I had the opportunity to do some work in classes at Harvard. And as we're sitting in the classes, all of the research we were doing on education, everybody was acknowledging the system we are in is broken and does not work. Literally all of the research acknowledged that.
Yeah, that's a problem. I'm going to, and Angie, get used to this because I'm into this topic. I mean, you are raising, most people who have a pulse have something to say about education. My daughter's an educator. It's a good thing she's not on this podcast because it would probably go on for about 8 hours. And she's a coach. My son's got some strong feelings on education. But let me rewind your tape just a minute. So what exactly were you doing in the public school sector, and what were you doing in the Christian school sector? What were you doing? Were you a teacher? Were you administrator?
I was a teacher in the public school sector. I was a teacher. In the Christian school world, I was a principal, and then I was also leading on accreditation teams. So all of the mainline accreditation teams for secular, who accredits public schools, I was also one of their team leaders for a number of them. So I was very involved in education at multi-levels in both leadership as well as being in a classroom.
Yeah, this is an American problem as much as it is a spiritual problem, as much as, it's a money issue. For those of us who are more free market thinking people, our taxes are extracted from us, and they're invested into a school system that we may or may not be in agreement with. In fact, anger is rising in many ways. I have to pay taxes for something that I don't even necessarily believe in. Not to say, and of course, I'm looking out my office window right now to my neighbor across the street, and of course, I'll leave them unnamed. But she has walked away from education because of all the weird stuff that's going on.
Right.
it's like it's grown a brain
Yeah.
outside of itself, and it's just a strange thing. I mean, we're going to dive into some of your stuff, but let's just get this off our chest here
Yes.
for a
Yeah.
little bit. So, were you now you're in Texas now, but when you were teaching, were you when you were in the public school sector and the Christian school, was that also in Texas, or where were you at?
No, actually, I have been a teacher in Minneapolis, in South Dakota, in California. I was leading in schools. At that point, I was a principal of school in Oregon. I was a
Oh, you're all over the place.
superintendent of this school. I have been all over the place, and now I am in Texas. Yes.
Okay, give me a little bit of your educational background. I mean, obviously you have a bachelor in
Sure.
something, and yeah,
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, I have my bachelor's in education and then a master's degree in education with a specialization on technology, and
interesting.
then
Okay,
have done and then have done future coursework with
yeah.
Harvard on global education and innovation in education.
So you're a good girl. You did all the things you're supposed to do. You got the right undergrad. You got the right masters to continue
I
this
did.
bureaucratic mess. Now,
Correct.
though,
Correct.
you're trying to bring your altruism, your idealism to change something.
Yep.
And I kind of cut you off as you were about to get on
Yeah.
your highway for Valor Global. So go
Yeah.
ahead, pick up from there.
Great. So again, I realized this system that I've literally given my life blood for. I mean,
Yeah.
and any teacher out there, they go into teaching with the best of heart and the best of intentions. They
Yes.
genuinely do. And what I realized is, and a lot of people don't understand this, is the testing industry is just under big pharma and how much money is involved in the testing industry. And that is worldwide. And so that's driving a lot of the brokenness that we're seeing. And so when I started doing the research and understanding, listen, this problem is not just in my school. This problem is actually a global problem. And as someone who is a believer, realize we have access to the throne room of God, the font of all wisdom on this world. Why in the world would we be looking for somebody else to help us really understand how do we effectively train kids? Because, as I was looking at the kids we were producing, even in my Christian school, they were apathetic, they were entitled, they didn't understand or appreciate anything that was being given to them. And that created such a concern to me that this is what even the best private school was producing. I stepped away realizing there has to be something more. And so as I stepped back to start considering what is it we could do, I really just prayed into it honestly and started seeking scripture. What does God have to say about this? And started putting together a blueprint for education. Number one is we have to position our students as creators, not simply consumers. When we understand it's the creators that are the ones that dictate culture. If we don't like the culture that we're seeing of today, we need to position our kids as creators. It's the creators of entertainment. It's the creators of what's going on social media. It's the creators of books. You go down the line, those are the people that are actually dictating our culture. And so if we're going to see a shift in most education positions, a student as a consumer, we stuff the content into you. Now you go regurgitate that content and there is a right answer. And the problem is our education system was developed in the 1830s. We actually stole it from the Prussians, and their
From the
goal
who? From the who?
from the Prussians, because the Prussians had been dominated in World War II, and their goal was, okay, we just got dominated. We need to raise up good little soldiers. That
Yeah.
was their goal. So we need them to follow the rules, conform to the rules. So when they're old, we've done a good job of indoctrinating them. Well, we adopted that because we were in the middle of the Industrial Revolution at the time.
Right. Right. Yeah. My
We
son preaches
adopted
that all the time. Yeah.
Exactly. So we adopt this model, right? We don't need you to think well. In fact, I believe it's Henry Ford who said, I don't need good minds. I need good hands that follow directions. And
Mm.
so when we understand that and start acknowledging that,
He's the devil. Yeah. Henry Ford's the devil. Okay.
yeah. When
Hey,
we
Angie,
understand
yeah,
that, go ahead.
take a breath for just a second. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of fun. Uh, we'll have to end the podcast at some point, but we're going to have a lot of fun. So before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about temperaments, and you shared with me that on the DISC test, for those who've heard of the DISC test, that goes way back. In fact, we use the DISC test for things we shouldn't be using it for today. That's a whole nother thing, because it was
Yeah.
originally designed for salespeople to make some quick assessments of who they're talking to. But anyway, it's still helpful. So you said that you were a high I, and
Yeah.
and I'm a high D. Now the thing with high I's is they fly fast, and they fly at 30,000 feet. And so you've said a ton of stuff already that, again, I'm going to bring you got to educate us.
Totally.
So you said that testing, you made this statement that testing, well, before I ask you to educate us more on the testing thing, before we go, I just don't want to go too fast.
Sure.
So you reminded me when you talked about, here we are, creations of God, and obviously God has reigned, not reigned like a reigns on a horse, but reigned like water from the heavens. God has rained down on us general revelation and specific revelation, so much wisdom. Why do we not pay attention to that? And it kind of just reminded me of Romans chapter 1, and loosely speaking, that human beings that detach themselves from faith, from God, from pursuing God, they get to this place where they claim to be wise just to become fools, and
Right.
that's the kind of thing we're seeing today. In fact, we're hearing people from all walks of faith, all walks of life, saying there's so many things happening in the world right now that just lack common sense, as we say.
True.
And we are walking away from common sense. But this testing thing, you've got to educate us a little bit more on that before we can go on, because whenever I run into a teacher and I say, how you're doing, and I catch him or her during a certain season and they say, oh, such and such testing is coming on, you can just see the stress. My granddaughter Macy, I asked her last week, I think it was, so how are you doing? How's school? Oh, I love school, but there's testing. And she literally said, everybody is stressed out. Everybody is stressed out.
Right.
That to me is amazing. That's a telltale sign, right? So talk to me about this crazy statement that you just said, that if those who are listening aren't listening carefully enough, you said, I'm pretty sure I heard you say, just below pharma are these testing. All right, you got to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So when you think about worldwide, we are using standardized testings. We're using SATs, APs. We are using ACT test. Those are things that are being utilized worldwide. In fact, we find ranking of whole countries based on testing scores. We find real estate is attached to testing scores, and taxes are attached to testing scores. When we understand all of this, we all of a sudden understand what's at stake when we're talking about the test. However, the tests do not take into any consideration what is going on in that classroom. You are giving kids the exact same test that are in an inner city classroom with no parents involved, as well as kids in a private Christian school where parents are heavily involved. We've had all access to prep the heck out of these kids and then it becomes about getting a score on a test and has nothing to do with actual meaningful learning. In fact, when you look at it, the great entrepreneurs, business builders of our day are not people that were awesome test takers. They didn't fit in the box. They were actually the disruptors and the thinkers. And so the test scores, what we know from research is the test scores aren't actually the best indicator for your future success. Because we know if you had high test scores, you'll get anomalies for sure in poorer communities or communities where parents weren't involved. But we know that parents being involved, nurturing environments, all are indicators of success. Well, those all naturally bring in higher test scores. So the testing industry from the start, and there's nobody that disagrees with me in the education sector, by the way, anybody who's honest. I was just one of the few administrators that I know that said, I'm calling a lie on this. I won't say what I normally say on that. I'm calling this a lie, and we're going to do what creates meaningful learning for kids, because
Angie,
these kids.
What do you normally call it?
I call it BS. I'm calling BS on this
You
industry.
still cleaned it up. Yeah, you still cleaned it up with a Bachelor of Science.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what you were trying to say.
I call it exactly. Yeah. No, I'm trying to be.
Christians, being Christian doesn't mean we have to walk around all puckered up. I mean, come on. Okay, so, but I'm still not getting who is behind. Okay, so I get the global standardization, the
Right.
SAT, the AP. I get that.
Right.
But who is the who? Who's the who?
Yeah. Well, it would be it's college boards is part of this. And there are people and things attached to this, because you understand whole countries are attached to this as the metric. We have college entrance attached to this metric. So you have colleges well invested in this. So there is, I'd love to make it really clean and go, it's this company. It really isn't. I mean, you have a massive amount of reason for every politician, for every school district to want their test scores to do well.
Well, in any economic powerful engine, it requires cooperation from more than two or three sources. It requires
Right.
the more that cooperate, the more powerful the engine, and therefore the most difficult it is to
Right.
stop or to turn. All right, well let's take a little break from that. Oh, okay.
I was going to say, I'll just go in the weeds just a little bit on this, on the testing front. The problem with the testing, in my estimation, is the tests get done in April. Generally, those tests come out in June. The teacher that could have done something about those results is passing the kid on to the next grade. So that we're not even using the assessments we are giving, and they don't tell most people what they think. If a kid gets a 90% in the reading on a test and they go into the next year's class and they get a 90%, and you might think, oh, this kid's pretty smart. But what happens if they get a 90% at the end of the year? Does that tell us if the kid grew in the year, or just tells us that this is a really smart kid? So this is a topic I could bore you with, so I will leave it at that.
Yeah, before we go on to the next click here, you mentioned real estate, and my brain went immediately to redlining in the financial sector, but maybe that's not what you meant. What did you mean? I think you were implying that these test scores or maybe these zip codes of average scores are highlighted.
Right.
What? Yeah. Explain that.
When you think about, as a parent, in fact, we're just in the process of looking at property right now. One of the big things our realtor immediately started talking to us about was, hey, this is in a great school district. That property over there that you're looking at, that's a terrible school district. So you want to make sure you understand that for your resale values, because those test scores are determining whether that's a good school district or not a good school district when you understand that resale value is placed
Gotcha.
on whether you're in a good school district or not.
Got you. So even ignorant people are fed this kind of information, and maybe not even those who receive the information and pass the information on are not even aware that they're carriers of this
Right.
virus that is going on.
Correct.
All right, that's
Correct.
interesting.
Correct.
Yeah, in the banking world, in the old days, at least, um, banks would redline different neighborhoods and not make loans to anyone in those neighborhoods because of their income and equating that to defaults, default on an auto
Yeah.
loan, default. Of course,
Right.
eventually that was considered discrimination and removed. I'm sure they still get away with it in some way, shape, or form
Mm-hmm.
because the machine is big. All right, well let's talk a little bit more. You started to, but we've already jumped into issues because you're living in the hot soup
Mm-hmm.
of education. And I'll say this anecdotally. In high school, I graduated towards the bottom of my class. I was bored to tears in high school.
Right.
In those
Right.
days, when you're 15 and a half, you could get jobs up to X amount of the time that you were in school and earn school credit. I think it was called work experience in those days. And, we're going way back, right? We're going 1975. And I got out of there. The only reason why I played the game is because in order to play sports, I had to take a certain amount of classes. But what's interesting is when I went to college on my own, when I decided myself that I was going to college, I graduated top of my class, and then in my graduate programs, top of my class, because I wanted to be there, and not
Right.
only that, I got to choose
Yep.
where I was going to go. There's a lot
Correct.
to say about that. All right, well, let's get back to Valor. Um, tell
Okay.
me about Valor and
Great.
dumb it down for me. What are we doing
Good.
here?
Good. So we started our first brick and mortar in Portland, Oregon, and it was really with the idea of we are going to take kids from apathy to impact. These kids were born with divine destiny, with a plan and purpose for their life. And our job isn't to stuff that things into them. Our job is to draw out of them and their gifts, their abilities, help them understand them so they can add their unique value into the world. Meanwhile, Valor is a fully accredited school. So it
Okay,
isn't that we
okay,
are
stop.
not doing a quality job.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Angie,
Yeah.
stop. You gotta stop. You throw these you throw these grenades out. Okay, so how do you do that instead of here's what
Yeah.
you're going to learn? I think that's what I'm hearing you saying. Instead, we're going to identify and pull this out of you. How do you do that? How do you
Yeah.
differentiate? I mean, certainly not all the
Good.
curriculum that we're sharing with children is bad, is it? You're not saying that. What are
Right.
you saying?
No, what I'm saying is, so when we are doing assignments, so let's take an algebra assignment, right? Every
Okay.
kid known to man at some point was like, algebra, when am I ever going to use algebra? Right. So when we're working with our kids on algebra, we're going to look at it through a different lens. We're going to back it up because helping a child understand how this is meaningful, how this is applicable, and how it can change your world changes everything. To your point, you've already said it, that when you got curious about your subject, you are an awesome student. And we see that all the time. So for example, with algebra, we were teaching our students about percentages. And so what we would ask the students to do is write a survey with 25 questions about something you're curious about a subject you're curious about. So let's say the student writes their survey about being a veterinarian because they're interested in that as a field course. So they write the survey. Then we say, now go give the survey to 25 people. They go do that. When they come back and they have the results, we say, now we're going to ask you to tell us to figure out the results of your survey. And here's the formula for you to understand the results that you're getting to. So it's this real time, real world application for them. But here's where it really gets good and where I think we miss it as educators is closing that feedback loop on the idea of we ask the kids two questions. What did you learn and why is it important? Because that's the piece. Too many of our kids right now go through the motions to get a grade. And grades are irrelevant in the grand scheme of life. It's actually about the learning being meaningful. So for example, in this survey, this is how I knew, okay, we are on to something, is a young man, 15 years old, answered the question, I learned that I actually experience and see percentages and results everywhere I go. When I'm reading when I'm reading news headlines and they say 79% of people, I see it in the stores, and when you ask them, why is that important? This was profound. This kid says, I realized it was important because I could have dictated my results based on the kind of questions I was asking. The critical thinking that is taking place is a shift when you position and see it's more of that creator mindset of let's take something you're interested in, combine it with something, because we're still teaching math. We're still teaching writing skills and reading skills. All of those things really matter. One of our graduates last year just went into, Villanova. And when you think of we're talking about a 7% acceptance rate, and he was a full ride student. It's not that we're not doing academics. We're just doing them in a way where our kids are thinking differently about them, and it isn't simply about producing a grade for them.
It doesn't seem to be that difficult of a pivot. Why can't other schools do this?
Well, one, you have to think differently. First of all, you have to be willing to call BS on the system. You have to be willing to look at it and go, we don't think it's meaningful to take a textbook, have you read. And here's the deal. It requires a lot of thinking and teacher training, right? At the end of the day, I can't just hand my teachers a textbook and say, teach the textbook. That no longer works in that scenario. And I no longer.
But Angie, I think there was a time where teachers were not handcuffed to stick to their textbook, but then they got handcuffed.
Yeah.
And that comes from, personal experience. And so you had people who were passionate about shaping the lives of kids, and there was a partnership. There's a huge community partnership. Do I trust this woman? Do I trust this man to be talking to my kids about this topic? And are they the kind of person that would be a model for them? Do they teach my kids how to think? Right. Does the school back them? Does the community? Do the parents have? It was truly a community thing. But this. Now we're going to offend some educators, and I'll let you speak to that later. I mean, I have friends who are superintendents of school districts. Obviously, I have friends who are principals and teachers, and of course, a ton of coaches across this nation. And they know who they are if they listen to this, and they know how much I love them and respect them, and I know what they are trying to do. And I know that they always put on a good face, but there is this big machine, that the Cincinnati Reds baseball team that they used to be known as the Big Red Machine. And whenever I think about stuff like this, I think about that. But all right, let's continue to talk about global itself, because are you characterized? Are you organized? Maybe that's the best word. Are you a charter school program? Are you a Christian school program?
Yeah.
What are you?
We are a Christian school. We haven't even begun to unpack it because one of the things that I realize helps our kids learn is enlarging their perspective. In America, we often confuse our politics and our faith in a lot of ways. And so that was a concern for me. I think a lot of the people that are haters of this country have traveled very little globally to encounter and experience the different places in the world. So that was one of my passions. The other thing is when you check it out in scripture, time and time again, God, one of the things for me was I wanted transformative education. I didn't just want to train minds. I wanted lives transformed, in particular by the gospel. And so when I checked it out in scripture and it said things like, James 1:27, pure religion is this, taking care of the widow and the orphan child. And then hundreds of verses talking about caring for the poor and needy. I knew that had to be, where are we giving our kids practice about that? We're frustrated that we're raising this really self-absorbed, entitled generation. But my question is where do we give them practice in being anything other than that? The world, we teach them, we're going to go to your sports programs. It's all going to be about you. We're going to stuff content into you. It's all about you. But nowhere do we say, if we want our kids to be impactful and think thoughtfully about the world and how they serve others, that has to be a normal part of their world. And so we actually, at our school, when you enroll your kids in one of our Valor schools, we are also sponsoring a kid in another school in a developing nation into education. So we're a one-to-one Christian school model. So right out of the starting gate, we're positioning you as a giver. Your family has to be a giver because you're saying, I am going to pay more money to this school because I know it's not just about my kid. It isn't just about our lives. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked from where I'm going. It's not simply though about partnerships with these schools. It's actually every March. In fact, I just got back. Every March, we are sending our kids global, worldwide, into these locations. So I was just in the Philippines for 10 days with students from South Korea, students from all over the United States, and the Filipino students coming together in a global collaborative, and worshiping with one another, but as well as learning and contributing to one another. So these are relationships that we've formed, and we've formed them in Kenya, Guatemala, Haiti, the Philippines, South Korea, and all over the United States right now. And so we understood when we started the foundation that we weren't just starting a school. We are starting a Christian education movement. And now that movement exists we have an online school as well as then brick and mortar campuses throughout the world.
Is the school a subsidiary of the foundation?
It is. The online school actually lives in the for-profit space. I started that in the for-profit space. And then I have a co-founder that's in the online school. And then I have co-founders that are in the foundation. So I want to make sure that it's clear. It's not just me on the journey.
Right. Well, I'm going to make you unpack all this as we go along here. So, the grades that you cover are all the school. Is it K through 12? Is it middle school, high school? What is it?
Great question. It's different for every campus. And so in South Korea, it's a boarding campus for middle school, high school. And in the online, it's 2nd through 12th grade. In Oregon, it's kinder through 12th. So every campus is just a little bit unique depending on the needs of the community that we're serving.
So did you start the foundation first, or did you start a school first? Where did you come up with the money? Where did you get this business savvy? You're supposed to be an educator, not a business person. What's going on here?
This is actually listen, I am 100% honest with you when I say this was a God-breathed vision. To give you an example of that, I was involved in another school that things were not as they should be. I walked away in the middle of a school year after, with having been really successful.
Angie, what is that? What, I don't know you yet, but I'm getting there. What does that look like when you when you walk out? Did you like throw a temper tantrum? Did you throw stuff
No,
across?
no, I
What did you
actually,
just did you?
listen, I really tried to, I really tried to employ Matthew 18, and tie the
Well, that's no
unfortunate.
fun.
I know no, I was actually, you would be very surprised by how well I work to
You
handle
followed
this
that step
situation.
by step. You went to the person who
Yeah.
offended you,
I
and then
went
you,
to
et
the
cetera, et
person,
cetera.
I went to the board, it was people over me. I went to the person, I went to the board, I went to the denomination. It was a church school relationship. And frankly, there was just some things happening that I could not, with any integrity, be involved in. And I understood.
For those of you who don't know what we're talking about right now, Matthew 18 lays out a discourse of how you resolve conflict. The context, though, is within a community of believers, so it's not always accepted probably in your place. Although, if you look at it closely, I think it's common sense and
It
probably
is.
should be
It's
practiced in your organization, whatever that is.
it's actually a really healthy
It is.
model to employ. You go directly, and you've been with me long enough to know I'm a straight shooter, have
Yeah.
direct conversations. And so I did that. I ended up
I was just kind
giving
of hoping that you were going to tell a story about throwing
well, I do
the
have
chair
a good
through the
story.
window.
I have a good story for you, but it's not that. I have a good story
Okay.
for you, but it's not that. Which, thank God, it's not that. I put in a 2-week notice, and said I'm done in 2 weeks, and went home. And if I'm being very honest, went home and
Right.
was in the fetal position for a while, going,
Yeah.
I don't even know what I'm doing with my life, because I don't believe in education anymore.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had given over 25 years into this space, and really realized I don't want to be a part
Yeah.
of giving this much. And so that's when I said, okay, God, if I built an organization like you would build an organization and there were no rules, I'm not going to follow any of the rules. I'm just going to build it according to what I think you're speaking and your plan. I laid out that. And so in 2016, I had like maybe 30 people at that point from my school emailing me saying, just tell us where you're going next year. We're going to follow you. And so finally I got the courage and said, I am going to host a night where I'm going to share with people what I'm working on. And it's open to the public. Anybody can come. This was March 7th, 2016. I was praying that perhaps 10 people would show up for this little meeting of the minds of here's what I think can happen. Honestly, over 300 people showed up.
Wow.
And it was terrifying. And I stood
That
up and
says
I
something.
said,
Yeah.
yeah, I stood up and I said, well, the school I had been running, unfortunately, the problem was not in the school. The school was actually quite successful. I stood up in front of the audience and said, here's the vision for Valor. Here's what I believe is possible, but you need to know I don't have money. You need to know I don't have a building, but I want to invite you to walk Jericho with me, because I don't think this is about me. I don't think it's about the school I left. I think God wants to do something new in education, and it's going to take all of us parents partnering on this journey. So if you will walk Jericho with me, I want you to pay and enroll your kid in the school tonight. And so with no school, no money, I had that night 85 people put money down and enroll their kids in a school that didn't exist. And then the school literally started growing every day on my cell phone, because people started passing out my cell phone. And I started knocking on all these church doors to see, hey, can I rent a building? I'm in the wilderness. There's a school following me. And remember, our model is 1-to-1. So it meant not just this school that I'm talking to these parents about, it meant another school that we were going to sponsor. So at the same time, we're working with a group that I had already been doing some missions work with in the Philippines to start a school in that village we're having those conversations simultaneously. we were praying through it. I was gathering this community. I think the big keys, whether you're a believer or not, money follows vision. And when you understand and you have a clear, compelling vision and some expertise on how to get there, people people just started lining up for it, and the school was growing literally on my cell phone. So in the fall of 2016, we opened our doors with 153 students and in the United States, in Oregon, and then had started our school in the Philippines. From there, it's just in the middle of our first year, somebody called me from South Korea that I had been working with and said, we have a resort property. If you would like to start a boarding campus on our property, we'll give you the property. And so in our second year, we started a school. But starting a school like that means we need a one-to-one school. So we ended up in Haiti at that point. In the middle of my second year, I was on vacation. I had a gentleman I had known from years prior who happened to be on vacation in the hotel next to me reach out and say, I see what you're doing online, because I was posting everything we were doing on social media. And he said, I want to start an online school with you. What does that look like? And so in our third year, we started the online school, which meant we needed more one-to-one schools. And so we went with Guatemala and Haiti. And so that's kind of been the journey we've been on.
I've got a bunch of questions. Can I shoot?
Yes.
Okay.
That's as nutshell as I can make the story for you.
Okay. So I think you said 8 years you've been at this. Is that right? Did I get that number right? Okay.
Correct.
So
Yep.
where are your physical locations right now? Where are the physical schools located right now?
Physical is in just outside of Portland, Oregon, in South Korea, in Kenya, in the Philippines, and Guatemala, and Haiti.
And how many online students are part of your online school?
Currently, we serve about 250 students in the online school.
And is that a certain grade range that you've narrowed it down to begin with, or is it the whole spectrum?
We do 2nd through 12th grade in the online school.
Okay. And what's your vision for that? I mean, how many? Maybe how many isn't the right way to ask the question.
Yeah.
But what's your vision for the online school?
This is a great question. One of the things about our online school that is unique and needs to be stated is because usually, especially people who have gone through COVID in education, they hear online and they shriek because they have trauma from what happened through COVID and the online education space. Because transformation is our core desire for our students, our online school is actually a very high touch, high community school. And so while we have families from 40 states in the United States, we have a lot of different opportunities where we're gathering in person throughout the United States, as well as students have an advocate that is personal. We call our advocates, they're online mamas. They're the ones that have connection, making sure our students are doing well, helping them learn life skills like goal setting, time blocking, things that none of us learned in school so they can be successful, and then teaching them students how to advocate for themselves. The reason all of that is important is because in general, online schools have a 30 to 40% retention rate year over year of their students, just because of lack of community and lack of follow through. A lot of kids fail in their online schools. Our retention rate's at 93%, which is as good as a brick and mortar retention rate. And then it also our pass fail rate is at 91% for our kids passing classes.
You're the co-founder, if I got that right. And
correct.
And are you? Is that title, is that posture where you work out of now, or do you have a different title that you use in executing the vision?
I have a lot of titles. Co-founder is the easiest one, but I do sit as head of school for both the Oregon campus as well as the online school right now.
I think I saw that on your LinkedIn profile. I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure that out. Okay. Um, okay, this is good. Do you have a written mission statement of some sort?
Yes. Yes. Are you
Yeah.
looking for it?
Yes.
I would have to pull it up. I don't have it memorized for you.
Okay.
I'd have to pull it up for you.
While
I
you're
should
looking,
have.
yeah, while you're looking for that,
Mm-hmm.
one of the leadership mistakes I've made in the past is not realizing how important it is to guard the vision, and that has multiple aspects to it. How are you guarding this vision that you believe that God gave you, and now you are expanding that? How are you protecting it? How are you guarding it?
Oh, I love this question. Our board actually just had gone through recently the book Mission Drift, which was really helpful in this. The secondary thing that we have taken our team through is a book called Traction, which is really that here's the 10-year goal, here's your 3-year goal, here's your 1-year goal, here's the 90-day plans. All of those things have been incredibly helpful. I'm like everybody else, have learned in the messy, have made wrong hires that didn't align with vision, learning the importance of drilling down in vision where my role as the visionary really does require me to lean in harder. But that's an ongoing day after day
Yes,
decision.
ma'am.
There's tools we've used, but
Yes,
it's,
ma'am.
as
It'll
you
be.
know,
Yeah, and the more you experience success, and what I mean by success is the accomplishment of your mission and vision, the more your vision will be susceptible to Judas's and to others who, if you struggle, everyone's going to leave you alone. But
right.
if you're successful, they're going to come after what you built, and they'll have their own desire for it, and
Yep.
it's leadership is such an important stewardship. Assuming that I'm doing something to assuming that I am doing something to make the world a better place. That's the new cliche. But let's use your word. Assuming that I'm doing something that brings transformation. Um, with that assumed, in this world of good and evil, regardless of one's deeper theological context, if you're doing good, evil is coming after you, and evil's coming after you sometimes in the form of friends
Yeah.
and confidants. And so I ask that to every leader that I meet that I think is doing a good thing. And unfortunately, it comes from personal pain because I'm a person who turns his back on and has trusted in the past, and I've learned the hard way, and it's my fault. It was my fault because when
Mm-hmm.
you steward leadership, it's your responsibility to be a butthead when it comes to protecting that vision. And
Yeah.
some people will say the craziest things to you. I remember one person stood up in a meeting when we were going through a huge capital campaign and said, "So where are you going to put the statue of you?" And they'll take shots at you in every possible way to get you just to back up, a little bit. So fervor
Mm-hmm.
and passion and diligence and dedication, builds good things. But then, we just have to be really careful. All right. Secondary question to that: did you find your mission statement, by the way?
I did, and I apologize for not having it. Did you want it now?
Yeah. Yeah.
All
Share
right.
that with us.
The mission is we partner with families to empower student leaders into their God-given purpose to serve the world.
And is that on your website?
It is. It
Okay.
is.
We'll
It.
have that in the notes,
Yeah.
the show
Yeah.
notes. Okay, so um, okay, good. Now, what I wanted to ask you next is kind of ticky tacky, but it, it gives us a flavor. You said earlier on in the podcast that when you stood up in front of these people, or even actually before that, I think it was, you made reference to the fact you inferred that the tuition for going to one of your schools is
Mhm.
probably a tick or two or three higher than the norm. Um, I don't need to ask you about that part because that's probably a little bit different from region to region. Um,
Mhm. Right.
if you're in
Right.
Northern California or Southern California, it's going to cost you. But
Correct.
for example, what is the tuition for online education? I would imagine it's tiered to some degree, but I don't know.
Yeah, our tuition for the online school is about $7,500 right now for a
That's
year.
per year,
Hmm.
$7,500. And
Yeah.
how much more is that than your competitors? So if we can call them that.
Yeah. I mean, when you understand that you can get online education for free. You can
Yeah.
get it for, there's a lot of charter schools out there. When you a lot of the private online schools are, $1,000, $2,000 a year. A lot of that though is wrapped around asynchronous education, whereas while students can do their school asynchronous, we actually are a fully staffed school with very intentional, almost concierge level support of our students, and our students are in relationship.
And that's where
So,
the advocates come in.
correct. Our model
Okay.
is significantly more expensive just even to run as a business.
Yeah. So in your knowledge and in your travels, what are some of the schools, Christian schools, charter schools, maybe even a anomaly in the public school arena that might be out, in the middle of
Mhm.
nowhere somewhere where they're less touched, by the big red machine, so to speak?
Yeah.
Um, are there certain schools that you would point to that you go, yeah, they're not exactly like us, but they're kind of pursuing the same heart, the same mind? Do you meet with these kind of people anywhere? Is
Yeah,
is
I
there?
mean, what's fascinating is you often meet administrators that love the amount of people. I do have a book that I wrote called The Way of Valor, and the amount of leaders that I'll have read the book and go, holy smokes, this definitely has convicted me and impacted me, because again, everybody acknowledges the system we know is broken. Nobody's really that bought into the system we know. And so there's plenty of leaders that will acknowledge it. I actually have quite a few administrators that have applied to jobs, for jobs with me. So
Now
there's
this
a
is
lot of,
this is a book that you have wrote
yes,
that
yes,
you've
it's called
written,
The Way of Valor. Yes,
The
yes.
Way of Valor.
It's called The Way of Valor. Yep.
And where do people get that?
You can get that on Amazon.
Okay, The Way of Valor. Great. We'll have that in the show notes as well. Keep going,
Thank you.
Angie. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
glad that you.
Uh,
I'm glad that you're bright with all these interruptions I keep throwing
uh,
at you.
no, I do that well. No, and then you do have, I have good friends like up in Idaho. There's a small little school called Freedom Academy that is absolutely a disruptor school. So there are groups of us out there, and honestly, if you look at what's happening even in the home education movement, the amount of parents has skyrocketed that are starting to say, we're not going to keep sending our kids into the lion's den. We're going to pull our kids out. And what we don't consider what we do homeschool, we consider it home education, because we're never asking a parent to grade papers. We're never asking a parent, but I will be very clear to tell you, on all of our schools, parent partnership is key, because there's this hostile relationship. You have educators that find themselves in a place where they feel like they know more than parents, and parents that have abdicated responsibility that God gave them. And
Wow.
so parent partnerships are is a key part of our organization, because at the end of the day, God gave parents their kids. Our job is to come alongside parents. We actually do quite a bit of parent coaching and provide a ton of parent resources, because what we understand is every kid is made just a little bit different, and it's challenging to navigate the world of parenting without the support in place. And so our school actually provides a lot of parent coaching along the way as well.
For my friends and acquaintances who are educators, we have probably have said some things that have offended you, and I'm going to ask Angie to speak to that. But before she does, I do want to say that, are you aware that what Angie said just seconds ago, this idea that educators are smarter than or know better than parents, that is not an isolated comment. I'm assuming that you've heard that before, but it is a wave that many resonate with. And I could give you all kinds of bureaucratic reasons to pile up on that. As a leader, I will say that I have never seen administrators, from board members all the way down to even principals, maybe not vice principals, but this idea of surrounding yourself with a moat so that you cannot be reached is unacceptable.
Right.
And it's
Right.
pretty much across the board. Now, I do have relationships with some, but they seem to be the exception rather than the rule. But I do think that this podcast, after Angie speaks to those we may have offended, I just have a couple personal questions for Angie regarding her leadership. But before I transition over here, I just want you to know that I don't think that, though we've had to fly at a certain elevation, I don't think that the argument that we put forth today is silly or isolated. I think it is legitimate. And I think even if you go to the Northeast, where all of our supposedly best and brightest are at, there is unrest there as
Yeah.
well. So something's happening, and we need something to
Mm-hmm.
happen. But we're
Right.
not attacking individuals, I don't think. And I will turn it over to
No,
you,
I'd love
Angie.
to. Yeah, I would love to. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to that. First of all, I absolutely love teachers. I think they are the unsung heroes of
Yes.
our
Yeah.
world, frankly. However, and I can imagine somebody hearing me make this statement of teachers feel parents know best, is teachers going, well, you don't know my parents. Here's what I think is really important to understand is there is a hierarchy that God has already put in place. He gave the responsibility of kids to parents. What I can tell you as a teacher is you have part of this story. The parents have the other part of this story. And so it's only as we come together and we're talking with one another that we get a better picture of this child. Because yes, this child may be showing up in your classroom doing X, Y, and Z, but you may be misinterpreting of why that behavior is what it is, right? You may be thinking this kid's disrespectful, when in reality, when we come together with the parent and we get more information on what's going on in this child's life, what's happening in this child's life. The other piece that is, I think, essential that we had to take on is we're going to truth tell with our parents. And parents, when we do that, please know we're not doing that to pass judgment on you. We're doing that because it's, again, as we come together. And I often have calls as a principal. I often have calls with parents in my school and say, one of my first things is, may I coach you? May I coach you on this? Because I've had the advantage as an educator to compare your kid to the 25 other kids. And so I'd like to give you some different perspective. And I think it's when we have those kind of respectful conversations. The problem is everybody is looking at a situation through a vacuum and through their own lens without context or greater information. And what we've discovered is, man, as we lean in and we determine, one, God gave parents their children, and it is their responsibility. And part of the problem is education. We did abdicate parents' responsibility. In fact, in a lot of ways, we said, yes, give it to us. And that's out of line. That's out of order. It's out of line. The second thing is when you understand you will never have greater influence in this kid's life than that parent ever. I talk to adults all of the time who are broken and wounded. The vast majority of them have been broken and wounded by a parent, and so it is.
Yeah.
Anyway.
In my terminology, is it off base to say that sometimes the position that a parent has, that it's the teacher's job to educate their children, is part of the problem? That kind of a idea versus that we're in partnership.
Yeah, the problem isn't just on a teacher's part.
Yeah.
The problem is both on I think honestly, if you talk to most of your teachers' friends, that you would hear them say, we wish the parents would step up. We wish the parents were more involved. That's not like teachers' unions. That's a whole other issue that we haven't addressed. They don't want parent involvement because they don't want parents speaking to the books the kids are reading in school. They don't want, those kind of things. So, I think most people wish that would be the case. And the problem isn't one-sided. Parents need to take the reality is everybody needs to take personal responsibility for their role in the equation, but understand they're only a part of the role. They're not the whole picture.
Maybe we can have you back on the Today Count show, and we could talk about unions, and we can talk about curriculum, and we could talk about this idea of how does the community ideally come together, without getting all weird and singing funny songs, and owning that. A couple questions before we go about you and your leadership. When you think about leadership, you're obviously doing it, but when you sit down and you think about it, what is your understanding of leadership, or at least how you are applying it? And then I want to give you the second question. How are you keeping yourself healthy, and what are some of your self-leadership habits?
Yeah, I love that question. Actually, I'm really intentional about my personal, because I don't think we can lead where we have not been or who we are not, So I definitely feel like I have to start with me personally, just in my physical fitness, how I manage my stress, how I have rest, and then the secondary thing, when I view leadership, I really see, I cast the vision and say, here's where we're going. But then my next major responsibility is to understand my people and know where's the best seat on the bus for you and what support do you need from me to ride on your seat. A lot of clarity, because I think that's why most organizations are not doing well, is they don't have clarity on what they're trying to accomplish, and they're not getting everybody on the same page. And so I see that as my job, is let's make sure that you have clarity, and then you're in the right seat on the bus, and we've talked really directly with you and gave you the coaching and training you need.
Angie Taylor, wonderful meeting you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I thought it was back and forth really well. I would love to have you come back down the road and talk about other things. I just had another idea that came with not just the unions and the curriculums and getting the right kind of participation, but then I start thinking about those who are economically challenged and what some of the answers and creativity
I
we
love
can
this
do here.
question too. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for joining us.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
My pleasure. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
If you're not part of the Lead Today community, let me invite you. Go to leadtodaycommunity.com. That's leadtodaycommunity.com and sign up for Monday Moments. It's a weekly email that will encourage your leadership. Again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for telling a friend about the Today Counts show.